Welcome back. Now we will begin our fifth featured session titled Environment, Social Governance Activities for Korean Firms. This session is hosted by Brain Korea 21 of the School of Business, Yonsei University. Professor Im-il, head of Brain Korea 21, will be moderating this session. Good evening, Professor Im. The stage is all yours.
네, 안녕하십니까. 이번 세션의 사회를 맡은
Hello, this is Im-il, professor of School of Business of Yonsei University and also the head of Brain Korea 21. Now, this session is entitled Firm Society and Corporate Responsibility. Now, of course, corporate responsibility is not only about its social role, but also about its value in the society, because these days consumers tend to look at the company's behavior as well as their image in making their spending choices. And another thing is that now regarding the ESG, of course, it is important for individual companies to think about what they're going to do. But then in a bigger picture, it is also important to think about what the role of the corporations should be and also the role of the society should be in the longer future. And that is why we have prepared this session. And for your information, the BK21 group, now one of our important topics, research topic, is the corporate social role. And that is why we are hosting this, and it is a great honor for us to be co-hosting this session. Now, personally, on the occasion of this GEF, I hope that we will be able to further the discussion and the narrative of the corporation's role in the society. And now with that, in this session, the Firm, Society, and ESG, we have the following panelists. So allow me to introduce them in the order of firms and academia, and also in the alphabetical order. Now first from the firms. From SK, we have Vice President Kim Eun-jung. Vice President Kim Eun-jung is currently the Vice President of the Social Value Committee of the SK SUPEX Council, and she is in charge of enhancing SK Group's social value. And she's also an alumni. She graduated from the School of Business of Yonsei University. And next we have Vice President Park Sung-gyu from Hyundai Motor Group. Now, Vice President Park is currently leading the economic research team of the research center, and he is also conducting research in relation to hydrogen business of Hyundai Motor Group. And third, we have Senior Vice President Oh Jeonghwa of Amore Pacific. Senior Vice President Oh is currently in the Sustainability Management Division of the communication part, and she is currently working on the planning and the vision for Amore Pacific's ESG and sustainability. Next, from academia, we have Professor Shin Dongyoub of Yonsei University School of Business. Now, he is in the field of management, especially the creativity and also the paradigm shift in organizational management. He served as the president of the Korea HR Association. And next is Professor Shin Hyun-Han of the School of Business of Yonsei University. Professor Shin is in the field of financial management, especially corporate management and innovation, and especially the financial performance of the CEOs. He also served as the professor in the New York State University, and he is also currently the head of the Student Welfare Administration of Yonsei University. And the third participant from school is Professor Kwak Jooyoung. Professor Kwak Jooyoung is also from the School of Business and also the director of the Center for Global Sustainability of the Institute of Global Engagement and Empowerment. And he also provides a lot of ESG consulting to many firms in Korea. Now let me inform you of the order of this session. We will first hear from the three firms. Each will present their ESG activities. And then we will also hear the comments and feedback regarding the presentation. And then there is going to be a free discussion among the panelists and the participants. And with that, we will first hear from the firms. The order of the presentation is the same as before, the alphabetical order of the name. So SK, Hyundai Motor Group, and Amore Pacific. And the time given to each firm's presentation is between 8 to 15 minutes. First, I would like to invite Vice President Kim Eun-jung from SK.
Yes, hello. My name is Jung Kim from SK. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit about social value at SK, the past, the present, and the future. Before that, I would like to tell you a little bit about our company. We are in business of energy, chemicals, semiconductors, components, materials, ICT, and logistics. We have a global network, and we're very active in our different business divisions. And so now I'd like to move on to the next page to talk about our pursuit of social value at SK. I'm sorry, I'm not used to the pointer, but in any case, I want to talk about how SK came to be interested in social value. We understand that society is developing at a very rapid pace, and we want to keep in touch with that. And there are different social challenges that are rising. These social challenges, in terms of solving these challenges, there's a lag in how the solutions for these challenges are coming out. And the customers, the governments, and investors, all of these different interested stakeholders are asking corporations and companies to also take the lead in solving these social challenges. And this is a demand that we have upon us. So SK came to think companies should do more than make products and services. Rather than this economic value that we create, we also have to create social value. And this is our own corporate social responsibility. And this is the mindset that we came to have at SK. After the founding of SK, we have continued to work on various different CSR activities. Recently, ESG has become very popular, but even before then, we have engaged in various different CSR activities because we know that we have to nurture people, we have to nurture woods and forests through trees. We have engaged in various volunteer activities involving college students and younger students and more. We believe that this is one way of trying to pursue social value in a very effective way, but we wonder if there is more that we could do. And there are these examples that you see here. But when there are social challenges, there's more that SK can do. Can we do one-off social support to fix that social problem? Or can we be more long-lasting and sustainable in our addressing of the problem to try to create enterprises and other different organizations that could respond to the challenges? We felt that it's more effective to try to create a virtuous cycle in terms of social impact ecosystem. And here, what you see here is a social enterprise that we founded ourselves at SK. And we also have another program called Social Progress Credit. There are many social enterprises that create social value and social venture companies that create social value. We want to measure their impact and provide incentives based on the social progress that they make. And this is positive incentive, and this would encourage the enterprises and the companies to do more in that regard. And lastly, you would see college students and undergrads being educated and trained so that they can grow up to become more social innovators in the future. Next, you would see something called DBL, Business Management. Since 2018, we have been working on what is called DBL management. BL stands for bottom line. I'm sure people here who have studied business management are well aware of what bottom line means, especially in the accounting sense. But when we add double business line, that means we not only look at economic values, but social values along with that. So when a company makes decisions, it should not just try to focus on economic value, on making economic benefits, but also look at the bottom line in terms of society and societal value. And this has come to take up about 50% of all the KPIs at our company. So through this, we not only look at economic benefits and economic value, but the invisible social values in our society as well. This shows us some mention of SKMS, which is the philosophy behind our company's business management, where we try to look at the happiness of all interested stakeholders that we work with, because everything we do ultimately is done to try to create more happiness in society. We want to try to create more happiness around us, and that can be done by creating more social value. And this could lead to more trust building among all of the interested stakeholders, of course, including our companies. And this is something that is a very important message that resonates within our organization and outside our organization. And this is a key founding philosophy of our company. Through this, we wanted to show you what we've done in the past and also what we are doing currently in the present moment. But now I would like to talk about what we plan to do in the future. What is the social responsibility aspect that we're going to look into in the future? Last year, many people consider 2021 as the year of ESG because ESG has become a very popular buzzword across society. I don't think I need necessarily to go to an in-depth explanation of what ESG means, but last year, we were able to see that many people have come under the understanding that ESG is something that companies must do, and this is a way for companies to create new growth engines, and this is a social consensus. I've been talking about social value, and now I brought up the mention of ESG, and I want to now show you this diagram that brings together these two values. This is how we understand ESG. There's essential ESG, as you see there, so that's the ESG specific approach. ESG is a value that financial firms use to measure the progress of corporations. This is a minimum requirement for corporations, that corporations have to manage at least this minimum level of risk. But we want to go beyond that to strategic ESG. This is where we try to innovate the BM based on ESG. So this could lead to short-term profit, but also in a long term, we can innovate our BM. And also added to this is to try to expand the social value that we talked about earlier, which is what SK pursues. And this ultimately is SK's own defined version of pursuit of social value, which is our own brand of ESG management. Among the different aspects of ESG, we believe that social at the S part is the most challenging. The E and G, I think that their directions are quite straightforward. Of course, there is a degree to which we can pursue them, but with social agenda, the range is so far-ranging, so broad, and there are many different indicators that we can pull from, so this is a very challenging area. When it comes to S, however, we have to continue to ask ourselves what we want to do as a company, and we're trying to set the agenda for social going forward. Here you would see company, value chain, society, various different interested stakeholders here. We are looking at a social agenda that could impact all of them. We're working very hard to follow up on our social agenda. On this, I would like to briefly talk about the different agendas that we have for society, which is what you see on the far right. First, there's a program called Happiness Alliance. I don't know if you've heard of this, but in Korea, even in Korea, there are many children who go hungry or who are under threat of going hungry. And our goal is to try to make sure that there are no children who go hungry. As we're not trying to say that SK is doing a great job or we want to lead the effort, but we are partnering with many different companies, governmental organizations, and even citizens and even local governments to try to leverage their level of expertise to create this alliance and work together. Local governments try to identify the children who are going hungry, and SK provides funding, and other companies such as Yogiyo can provide food delivery services. So many of these partners work together to try to create more impact because we're doing good deed and we want to create a virtuous cycle of these good deeds through the Happy Alliance. The effects that we have seen from the Happy Alliance are what you see on the right hand of this chart. Next, this is UNTECT program, which is a leading CSR program that we have at SK. Last year, because of COVID-19, there were issues and problems in fixing the lunchboxes and cooking the lunchboxes for elderly people who were going hungry. And this was a huge challenge, especially for elderly homeless people. So we thought what we could do, instead of just coming up with our own way of making and arranging these lunchboxes, we tried to ask and commission SMEs who are already struggling with low level of business, ask them to create the lunchboxes for us, and these lunchboxes will be served to people in need. This year, we've also started another round 2 of UNTECT. Because of COVID-19, we've seen that fewer and fewer people are giving blood. So we want to try to encourage more people, not under just the SK family, but other people as well, to try to donate their blood. In engaging with these CSR activities, SK is trying to work to identify the issues that we have to understand, and we want to communicate that together we can make an impact. Next, you would also see here, which is an SE MBA course that we're working with KAIST to provide. We feel that ultimately different social entrepreneurs and the CEOs of social enterprises have to have more capacity building so they can create social benefits and social impact. So under KAIST, the business school, we created an SE Social Entrepreneurship MBA course to try to educate more young entrepreneurs. And this year, the 10th class will begin their MBA course. Lastly, this is a program that we have as well called SOVAC, which is short for Social Value Connect. This is it's a platform that brings together many people who are worried and want to do more to create more social value. And we opened this several years ago, and we started to have all these roundtable discussions to try to discuss how we can build social value. But because of COVID-19, we didn't have offline discussions. We did have online discussions, however, and this was a way for us to share and generate more online content. I'm sure you can see URL addresses here, so you can go to these links and also register and like and subscribe as well. Very briefly, I told you about different social value activities that we're doing at SK. Ultimately, we want to lead these efforts going forward instead of just being followers in these efforts. Because we are corporate, we are entrepreneurs, we feel that we have to lead the way in this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Yes, SK is a company well known for trying to fulfill its corporate responsibility. But then now listening to the presentation, I can see that not only the activities, but then also the philosophy, as well as the value system are well in place. So thank you very much for the very informative presentation. And now let me invite Vice President Park Sung-gyu of Hyundai Motor Group. Hello, this is Park Sung-gyu. I'm from the Management Institute of HNG, and thank you very much for the chance to provide a presentation. Now today I would like to talk about hydrogen economy. So it's been about 2 years since COVID-19, but if we are to make the comparison between before and now, then one thing is higher interest in the global environment, and second is the more commonplace understanding of such terms as carbon neutrality or global warming. Now, as we all know, carbon neutrality is a state where carbon is no longer used as fuel. So for this to be possible, then we would have to use more renewable energy. Now, why we need hydrogen is related to the issues of renewable energy. I'm not here to talk about the pros or cons of renewable energy. I'm just going to point out some of the, I want to make the point that hydrogen is a very viable alternative to overcome the inherent limitations of renewable energy. Now, renewable energy, one characteristic is its high volatility. In other words, the power generated during the day and night is vastly different. Likewise, there's a vast difference between seasons. And because of this, the power generation efficiency tends to be lower. And in fact, in the developed or in the Western world, then they say that using the wind power or other types of renewable energy source, then the energy efficiency or the power generation efficiency is only about 20%. In order to overcome such low efficiency, then they have to have more installation. But then because of the large-scale installation, it is actually going to increase the volatility. So if I may use the graph on the right-hand side to give you a better explanation. Now, this is also called the duck curve because of its shape. Now, when the renewable energy is not used, then that would be the orange line. So that is in the upper side. And then PV or other types of renewable energy. And then the power generation from that is compared to non-renewable energy source like nuclear or fossil fuel. So compared to that, you see that during the day, then from the renewable energy source, power generation plummets. And this also means that there is a bigger share of renewable energy. But then now, at nighttime, then you see that the fossil fuel energy generation is similar. So then what we can point out from this curve is that now for the renewable energy generation, if it goes up, then fossil fuel generation will go down. So isn't this a better thing? So you might ask this question. But then now on the grid, now on the power grid, it is actually very important to maintain a consistent flow of energy. So then there is the problem of not being able to dramatically increase or decrease the power flow in the grid, depending on the time. So what happens is that now sometimes there is too much power flowing through the grid, so you would have to consume this, or maybe this is a bit too technical, so you would have to increase the generation cycle so that you would actually have to make the power disappear in the course of power transmission. So in other words, in order to overcome these limitations, then you need to use environmentally friendly energy source and then to generate the power, and not only that, but to store the energy that has been generated over days or even months. So if that does happen, then even when there is too much power being generated from the renewable energy source, we can still store this. And right now, so because of this limitation, the viable solution that is being mentioned the most often is hydrogen. So the hydrogen, so the renewable energy that is produced too much during the day, then you can utilize hydrogen to store this. And then now when the energy generation is lower, then you can tap into this stored energy in the hydrogen. So this means that we will be able to overcome the limitations or the fluctuations of the renewable energy source. Now for hydrogen, one of its hallmark is that in terms of production, there are various methods of production available. Ultimately, of course, it has to be a green hydrogen, so it has to be environmentally friendly. So you would have to utilize water in order to dissolve the power. Then we can get the most eco-friendly hydrogen with no CO2 emission at all. But then now in between, for the natural gas, so we call this reformation. But anyway, so you can also reform natural gas in order to extract hydrogen from that. Or what happens now is getting the hydrogen from the chemical processes. So we can collect the hydrogen from the chemical processes. But anyways, the ultimate picture is to produce green hydrogen, which is the environmentally friendly hydrogen. We often call this green hydrogen. And again, but we can utilize different modalities of production, and also the application is quite broad. So let's say for a vehicle, now then let's say the fuel cell. So if we are to have two fuel cells in a vehicle, then it can drive a truck or a bus. And if the fuel cell is divided into two, then you can also use it for forklift or smaller cars. And so this means that, so if we are to use a lot of them, then you can also run a large-scale power generator, or you can also use them in the home or in the local regions. And also because the efficiency is very high, it can have much higher load on the vehicle, and it can also allow for longer range. So this is a simpler diagram, and actually, because of this field is still developing, the terminology is still not unified either. But anyway, so this is called the UAM, so urban aerial mobility, or VTOL, so vertical takeoff and landing. So these are just about the urban mobility. So I draw this based on San Francisco. So now let's say if we are to have this UAM or VTOL based on batteries, then the coverage, the area coverage would only be this small circle. It's because of the energy output or the power output being limited. But if you are to use hydrogen to fuel UAM or VTOL, then it dramatically increases the coverage. So if you are to use hydrogen energy, then this also means that we can make much greater diversity of services available that would not have been otherwise available using batteries. Now, according to McKinsey, now they are also putting up rosy outlook for hydrogen. So they're saying that close to 20% of the total energy demand will be met by hydrogen by 2050. And also the CO2 reduction will be about 6 billion tons coming from hydrogen. And also there's going to be about 30 million jobs to be created in this field. But of course, for us to reach this rosy end, then we also have to overcome a lot of hurdles and challenges. Let me briefly tell you about the history of Hyundai Motor Group's development of hydrogen. So we have taken notice of the potential of the hydrogen vehicle. So we started development of fuel cell in 1998. Then also on the right-hand side, I'm sorry about the small pictures, but then now you see in 2002, we had the first Santa Fe developed utilizing fuel cell. And at that time, this one vehicle was about $1 million. And then, as a result of this, now in the Tucson fuel cell, so this was developed as a result of the first electric vehicle or the hydrogen vehicle mass production system that we had built in the world. And you can see that from the first fuel cell development until commercialization, it took over 10 years. So this is just to show that we have made continued efforts in this field. Then also you see at the bottom, now these are the hydrogen trucks. And we have also exported a fleet of 17 trucks to Sweden. So this is also the first in the world of exporting hydrogen trucks in such a large number. And also the Hyundai Motor Group's Nexo last year, so the second generation Nexo, also topped $20,000, 20,000 units globally in sales. And we have also announced the vision of popularizing hydrogen energy by 2040. Now, carbon neutrality, this concept itself has become more commonplace, but then the question of how has not been cleared up yet. And as I mentioned earlier, hydrogen energy can be a very viable, very strong alternative in the future. And based on this belief, we continue to develop our technology and make our investment. Now, by 2040, now we want to create a society where hydrogen energy is used by everyone, in everything, everywhere. And also for not only vehicles, but from production all the way to utilization. So we also want to create the type of technology that can be used across the spectrum. And yes, we will continue to develop the technology to popularize hydrogen energy. And for the production and storage, we will try to develop longer term and large scale technology. And then we will also enhance the efficiency of the storage modality. And we will also create fuel cells that are flatter and lighter so that they can be used in other types of vehicles. and also in not only in the commercial vehicles, but also in trams, in urban areas. Not only that, also for ships. So we will try to broaden the applicability as well. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Park, for your presentation. On ESG, you have focused on the E part, or the environment, and I think that was a very important presentation that you gave. Next, we'd like to hear from Jeonghwa, Senior VP at Amore Pacific. Hello, I am Jeonghwa. I'm the SVP of Sustainability Management at Amore Pacific. It is an honor for me to give this presentation on behalf of our company today. I asked myself what the people here, the audiences, would like to hear from us at Amore Pacific. And the organizers have asked us to focus on S, to try to tell you about the different activities that we're doing both globally and locally. We have different items on our agenda, and after 2017, we've been really focusing on what we should do in terms of CSR. We've been working at this at the executive level, and so we've worked after the SDGs came out, so we focus on SDGs 3, 5, and 8, and today we'd like to focus on gender equality. I'm going to go in this order. Just briefly on Amore Pacific, our company. Before I tell you the products and services we sell, I would like to explain why our company came into being. And our company exists because we want to create a more beautiful world and create beautiful people. This is the mission of our company. In fact, our mission is literally, we make a more beautiful world. And if you read a more beautiful world together, you would see that this can also be read as Amore. And this, I can tell you, is a founding philosophy of our company. And we have 77 years in our history. So I think many of you would be familiar with our company. So I'd like to briefly tell you about that, that we sell beauty and health and fitness. These are our 6 leading flagship brands. There's Seolhwasu luxury brand, Laneige, Innisfree. There's Lyo, Osaluk, and Vital Beauty. So these different brands are our effort to try to create a beautiful, healthier world. Of the many different activities that we engage in, today we'd like to talk about CSR activities focused on the lives of women. If we were to ask what is the vision of our CSR activities, we would say that our mission is to try to create lives that are more beautiful for the women in our lives. Under the vision of a more beautiful world, we want to make sure that the women whose lives we touch can live the lives that they want to live. And we want to try to create a more beautiful world to try to contribute to more beautiful lives of women. And in 1963, we started selling cosmetics products, beauty products, door to door. Women worked as door-to-door salesmen at the time, and this was after the war. And this was a great business opportunity for women, growth opportunities for women, and income opportunities for women in the post-war era. As you can see, the news article says our CEO's interview says that women can be their own CEOs. They can own and operate their own business in their respective area. And this was our first approach in how we approach women as a whole. And under this vision, we have established our strategies based on these 2 pillars. The first is health and well-being, and the second is economic empowerment. They have to do with SDGs 5 and 3 and 5 and 8, respectively. Today, we also have been asked to talk about our activities for the global and local sphere. These are different strategies that we have for both the global and the local sphere. But of course, the specific programs are a little bit different depending on the country or the market that we're in. Under the first pillar, health and wellness, we have several programs, about 4 that I would like to tell you. The first is the Pink Ribbon Campaign, which we began in 2001. We want to try to help women and nurture women to lead healthier lives. And so, in that regard, we try to raise awareness about the importance of early detection of breast cancer, which impacts women. And thus far, about 480,000 people have participated in this program. The Korean Breast Health Foundation has been established in 2001, and since then, we've organized the Pink Run and also helped many women raise awareness about early detection, getting screenings for breast cancer. In China, we do something similar under the name of Moripao, under the Moripao program. Here, we work together with the Chinese government and the NGOs. In the case of China, we work together with the Fund for the Growth of Women, and together we organize the marathon. In China, however, we also have expanded our Raising Awareness campaign to cervical cancer as well. This Pink Ribbon campaign encourages women to try to detect breast cancer and have early diagnosis of breast cancer. There's Make Up Your Life, which is another program that we do. Many women cancer patients, after their cancer treatments, feel a less lowered self-esteem and self-confidence because of their changed appearance. So since 2008, we've started Make Up Your Life, where we try to provide makeup tips and lessons and help cancer patients and cancer survivors to try to create new lives after their cancer treatments. And since 2008, this has been expanded to include about 20,000 beneficiaries. The third program is Amore Youth. This was begun in China in 2020, very recently. As I mentioned before, in China, we've had a campaign on breast cancer awareness. 2020, we tried to tailor our response more to the Chinese needs, where we wanted to reach out to many young people in China who feel a sense of anxiety and depression. So this is the kind of mental health program that we started in 2020. So under the far-ranging scope of health, we've looked at not just cancer, such as breast cancer, but also mental health as well. The next pillar is economic empowerment. There are 4 programs that I would like to share with you. The first program is called Hope Shop, which began in 2004. This helps women, female entrepreneurs, set up new businesses. It's a microcredit program where we provide microfinancing opportunities to women who can set up their own companies. And we work together with the Beautiful Foundation in Korea. We've seen 474 businesses opened thus far, and their survival rate is about 71%. So we have worked with many women to set up and open new businesses. The second program is called Beautiful Life. This is where we try to provide economic empowerment opportunities for low-income women who are seeking jobs. The third, through this, we have seen an employment placement rates of about 44%. We have worked together with a government organization in Korea to try to increase the self-esteem of women. The third program is Meet Your Dream, which began in 2013. And we've expanded this to include female middle school and high school students. This is a pro bono mentoring program for capacity building of young people. Many makeup designers or hairstylists and research personnel work together to provide mentoring opportunities to children. And through this program, the young students can also become qualified beauticians or makeup artists or etc. so they can design their dreams for the future. The last program is also something that is focusing on China, called Better Shin 2020. We've done outreach programs in China. Recently, we were able to hear from the local provinces in China that they are in need of more economic empowerment programs for job placement, especially in the rural areas. So we started Better She in China together with a government organization called Fund for the Growth of Women. And this has helped many women find jobs. About 80% of job placement has been done through this program, where women can find different jobs, including domestic helpers. So for decades of years, we have worked to try to create and sustain CSR activities in both the two pillars of health and well-being and economic empowerment. We have also engaged in a 2030 Amore Beautiful Promise where we set forth 5 different commitments, which include less plastic and carbon neutrality. And also with the female women's empowerment agenda, we have also committed ourselves to continue to propose healthy lifestyles to women across their life cycle, going beyond early detection of cancer. We know that there is now widespread awareness of breast cancer for women, so we want to go beyond that and try to have more women understand about their health issues better across their whole life cycle and expand that to also mental health and psychological health as well to try to provide better quality of care for their whole lives. In economic empowerment, we have been working on women of working age thus far, but we want to expand our beneficiaries to the youth and to teenagers in the future. And we also want to help women in rural communities living in farms, etc., to try to provide economic empowerment opportunities for them, especially at the global level. And by 2030, we're going to see an accumulated investment level of about 100 billion won to try to have a harmonious growth with our interested stakeholders. And through this, we hope to create a more beautiful world in keeping with the founding philosophy of our company so that we can provide more growth across all of our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So yes, especially because it's a company that produces products that we use every day. So I could really feel and also agree with what you were saying. And then now we would move on to the discussion time. So now I'd like to move on to the panel discussants. Now first, Professor Shin Dongyoub. Well, now all 3 companies, now these 3 firms are the ones that I often mention in my ESG lectures. I have also conducted many interviews with them, so not only am I familiar with the presentations, but I also believe that what they're doing is ideal and worthy of respect. So I see that the vision and the goals, so I fully agree with the stated goals and the vision. But then one challenge is that now let's say for the environment NGOs or the civil society and also the firms, so actually it's not the environmental groups or civil society that are conducting these activities, but then they're done by the firms. So I would say that that is where the challenge arises. So in other words, on one hand, they are more, comparatively speaking, more idealistic. And perhaps there is a gap between that and the realistic business decision-making. So I guess that's where the dilemma arises. So of course, the 3 companies, they all have different situations, but then I would say that the biggest challenge is with the Hyundai Motor Group, and then probably SK, because Amore Pacific, it is perhaps moving in a similar direction between the ideal and the business. So now then I would like to ask this question. I also asked this in other seminars or lectures, but then now it goes for all 3 companies. But let's say now when you use the name SK, then yes, mutual or shared prosperity for society and the firm. So yes, it is right. So that should be the desired direction. But then, at least for the shorter term, when we think about the company itself, then sometimes there can be clashes between these 2 interests. And how we are going to address these clashes is going to be one big challenge. And especially for SK, now when it first came out with the social value or and so they had a seminar on that as well. So I took part there. But I see that many of those in the management are still not fully convinced about it. So yes, again, the ideals and the vision, they are all fine and good. But then now if there are some clashes with reality, and also let's say for SK, if there can be some impact on the business performance, I mean, if the impact is small enough, then perhaps it would be acceptable. But then if it is a major blow, then it would be cause of worry, and it would also be even more worrisome for companies like Hyundai Motor Group. Now, what I have observed recently is that it was also in the report, but anyways, the hydrogen vehicle. So it is true that hands down, a hydrogen vehicle is the most desirable or the ideal model, but also it's not always the most ideal model that gets adopted in the world. And we see that like companies like Tesla or led by Elon Musk, now they are setting the standard globally. So then does this mean that we still have to move toward this path with a longer term vision, moving toward hydrogen vehicles? Or I think more recently Hyundai Motor Group was more ambitious, but then now Hyundai Motor Group is now talking about electric vehicles. Well, we're still ambitious. Okay, then for the business managers, I do believe that this is an issue that they have to grapple with, not an easy one either. So then I'm not suggesting that, we have to follow this example, but Patagonia could be one example. I mean, they are really obsessed with environmental friendliness. So, in the end, when you sell clothing and then afterwards they would be discarded. And now they're saying that they are going to develop clothing that will not be discarded. And as a result of that, that actually impacted their revenue, reduced it by half, but still they are entrenched in that path. So I'm not saying that that should be the path for the companies here, but now for the 2022 and also until 2025 or by 2050, then the goal that you have would be right. But then in the meantime, in that path, how are you going to overcome some of the challenges? And also, I think, as I said, Amore Pacific, you probably have lesser of this issue. And yes, for Amore Pacific, it is true that you started with the women's issues, but then, so women, Korea, and then Asia. But today, many of Amore Pacific's customers are men. And also, you're still focused on women. And do you believe that that is still going to be a relevant standard, or let's say looking toward the global market? So now moving beyond the Asian beauty and looking more toward the global beauty, then perhaps just focusing on women or gender, perhaps there would be a limitation.
Thank you very much. We'd like to hear from all of the panelists first and then turn to the presenters for their responses. Next, we'd like to hear from Dr. Shin Hyun-Han. When it comes to ESG, I myself have been focusing on research related to GEEF for a long time. However, the interested stakeholders on governance are particularly shareholders and the executives, the chief executives. What can the companies do to try to maximize the value of the shareholders? And this was the grounding question in the past of governance. But now many people have been saying that we have to go beyond the realm of shareholders, which is why they've been talking about CSR, CSB, where they talk about social value, and now they talk about ESG and have broadened that realm. And we've seen this transition take place for the past 20 years. If we look at the stakeholders of ESG, there's shareholders that I mentioned before and bondholders. And under S, there are the employees, members of the organization. And then there are customers and the government, and also the general public. There are many stakeholders under the arena of S, but there's also suppliers. However, the three companies have all said that you are engaged with ESG activities, and I'm sure that you are. I think that maybe you've skipped over this area in your presentation, but I was curious as to what you are doing vis-a-vis suppliers. I'm sure you are doing excellent jobs regarding environment and customers and employees, and also against the general public as well. In fact, in almost doing the job of the government. But I think that I was wondering what you're doing for your suppliers and with your suppliers. Recently, we've seen a lot of regulations on online platform companies, and the reason for this is that the customers are seeing value, but the different suppliers or different partners who are working in the market, who are selling their products in the marketplace, are having the rights taken away from them. And this is why many people have been calling for regulation for these platform companies. So I think that this is very important social value that we have to concentrate on. By that I mean the work that we're doing vis-a-vis the suppliers. And so I was wondering, maybe if you haven't talked about this in the presentation, if you can still follow up on this for me in your presentations. Thank you.
님 의견을
And next, Professor Kwak. Yes, the two previous professors also said a lot of good things. And now, given that I am in international business management, I would like to approach this more from an international perspective. Now, it was last year that the UN CTAD elevated Korea as a developed country. Now, actually, for Korea, the international business has decades of history, and also the current companies, many of them are global companies. But now, so this means that Korea is no longer a developing country, not even a medium income country, but officially, Korea is a developed country. And that means that the companies here are also in a developed country. So now then, we also have to think harder about the global theme of social contribution. So now, during the winter semester, I also teach the emerging market economy, and also this semester I also taught about Unilever, and their theme was growing with the market. So I talked about the Unilever India and also in Unilever Vietnam. So we looked into the cases of different countries, and then now what I discuss with the students is that Unilever company, the products or the portfolio might be a bit different by country, but then according to the business papers, then they talk about overarching framework. In other words, they have this overarching framework, meaning that they have this global theme. And then based on this, perhaps by country, their functions or the strategy might be a bit different, but they all are united under this overarching framework. So today we have the three companies in Hyundai, Amore Pacific, and SK. They're all global companies. Now, my suggestion would be, of course, you are doing a lot of good things, a lot of different activities, but perhaps it's time for the companies also to create a link, or actually to globalize the link between the society and your activities. So perhaps you need to have a global branding of this link between your activities and the society. And so let's say for like if it's SK, then people will be reminded of that brand. And perhaps that would be one way of making your activities more sustainable. And now this program, this session is made possible by the initiative of the BK21. Now, as the planner of the session, I also have contacted many companies, and I actually wanted to invite many more of them, but unfortunately I was rejected by quite a lot of them. And the reason is, now for the corporate contribution, especially regarding the ESG, now they say that they have really no content to talk about. So they're saying, I'm sorry, Professor, but really have nothing to talk about. So now, yes, those present here today are the leading companies of Korea, but then I do hope that next year and the year after that, many more companies will have richer ESG content to share. And also, even if it takes time, the activities conducted by the companies here, now they will be creating good consequences in our society, so that even without a session like this, companies of Korea take it for granted that they would take into account the social context of their activities, so that they would have in mind the concept of sustainable development.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn to our speakers. As you can see, our discussants here are renowned scholars, and so we were very glad to hear from them. But I think another challenge is that they have asked very difficult questions. In listening to the questions, I was able to see that they were asking about the different challenges that companies are coming across. So how are the company's CSR activities different from what NGOs are doing? And when there's a clash between economic value and social value, what should you do? And there are many different interested stakeholders, shareholders, bondholders, employees, government, etc. But there are some stakeholders who might be left out. So how do you respond to that issue? So ultimately, ESG is very good, but what can we do to try to make ESG efforts more sustainable? I would like to turn to our speakers to respond to this. We'd like to hear first from VP Kim Eun-jung. I think that the difference between what companies and NGOs can do is that because we're corporations, as I mentioned in the presentation, we can do CSR activities in a way that we can do, that we can do best. So instead of just doing a little bit of what we can do, we can use minimum resources to try to create maximum impact, a kind of collective impact. And when we talk about this collective impact, we cannot just look at one goal or go it alone. But I think that in terms of solving a common challenge, it is very important to bring together many different stakeholders and organizations, but have one organization that gives a rallying cry and bears the flag and trying to make this more consistent. So with the Happy Alliance program that we do, or the Untact programs that we do, this is not something where it's done under the name of SK, but we are the rallying cry behind these efforts. And also when there is a clash between social value and economic value, yes, this could be a problem, which is why in 2018, the chairman talked about DBL. Of course, there are going to be conflicts. However, when 50% of the CEO's KPIs are on social value, and we try to make measurable impact and try to improve on this impact, this is something that pushes us to do better and challenges us to do better. And yes, as you mentioned, in the short term, there could be some clashes and conflict, but ultimately we feel that in the long term, this conflict is not true. There is not a conflict. So that's why we've announced that we're going to go carbon neutral in 2050 and try to do what we can to try to achieve this goal a little bit earlier. But some people say, won't that cut into your economic bottom line? Especially because with SK, we are also an energy company, so this was a very difficult choice for us to make. And there are companies within our family that make plastics. But if we don't work on this, then within global society and the financial society, we will not become sustainable. And we will not receive the funding that we want and the investment that we want, which is why we have decided to work on this and work on carbon neutrality for the future. Also, when it comes to different interested stakeholders, I think that when it comes to us, as with other companies, we look at many different stakeholders. There are the organization members and employees. It's difficult for us to go through all these details right now, but I think that we do have a priority of our stakeholders and we're following up very well.
And then Vice President Park from Hyundai Motor Group. Right. In the presentation, I spoke a bit slowly for the presentation, but then I usually speak much faster, so I hope that the interpreter will not be having too much of a hard time. Now, Professor Shin, well, thank you very much for pointing out our dilemma. Right, so between the economics and social value, how are we going to overcome the clashes? And I would say that that is going to be a perpetual issue for firms. And in fact, yes, sometimes they are really all tangled up. And of course, by industry, there would be some differences. But then given that I'm from a motor company, I would just like to briefly tell you about what is going on in the auto industry, especially in the Korean auto industry. When we look at the ecosystem, and also historically speaking, especially, then there are some challenges. Now, for example, the auto industry, including indirect employment, they said that there are about 250,000 employees. So it's a huge ecosystem with about around 8,000 companies involved. And when we build one vehicle, about 30,000, well, usually say 20,000, 30,000, but anyway, so in fact, 30,000 parts and components. And if we have like 70,000 units of vehicles, then it is over 250 million parts and components. In other words, it's a hugely complex industry. Then now from the hydrogen, now actually there is about 18% of, so 18% of that is going to be power that is going to be fulfilled by hydrogen. So it's also very environmentally friendly energy source. So the NGOs are also in favor of this. But then now another thing that we have to worry about is the infrastructure or the institutions and the technology of that are related to fossil fuel. Now, they have been accumulated for over 100 years, so it is actually the most convenient to use fossil fuel. So if they did not emit GHG, then it would have been best. But so it is not easy to replace such century-old infrastructure. And also the internal combustion engine, now they would be one of the biggest emitters. So we all know that we have to replace it with more environmentally friendly vehicles like electric vehicles, and also hydrogen vehicle would be one viable option. And we know that many companies who were ahead of us in developing hydrogen vehicles, many of them failed, but we are still at it. So perhaps it is the ambition and the perseverance of the management. But anyway, so we have been at it for over 20 years now, trying to develop hydrogen vehicle. And so, and also one misunderstanding and one question that we often get asked is, so we are not doing electric vehicles, we're only doing hydrogen vehicles, but then actually we produce a lot of EVs. So smaller vehicles that are Kona, and then there's also the Ioniq 5, GV69, and then also the electric version of the G80. And then, so you see, these are only the currently available EV models. And actually, no other company has such a large portfolio of EVs. And of course, Tesla is a leader in EV, and it has a premium image, so it has a big influence in the industry. But then, for traditional OEM, for the traditional auto industry, to have this kind of performance in EV is really not easy. And so we emphasize both the economic value and the environmental or the social value, and that has led to this result, I would say. And also now, so that is about our EV and also the hydrogen vehicle issue. And then also we also talked about transition, but of course, the transition itself is not easy. And of course, they talk about just transition, especially in the EU. So we talk about just transition or fair transition, but then, the meaning of just is also highly complex and not easy. So let's say if we sell EVs, then we just build them and sell them. And if that is the end of it, then not a problem. Then we could always also change the suppliers for the EV. So for example, instead of the engine company, we just get the battery company. So that is about it. But then, given that we are leading the Korean auto industry, and also there are 8,000 suppliers in this ecosystem, and we are the final consumer for these 8,000 suppliers. So not only the economic value, but we also feel the burden of social responsibility. As you know, in the Korean auto industry, I would say that it is only Hyundai and Kia that are doing this type of a relevant play, I would say. So we also think deeply about how we're going to pull along the suppliers in the ecosystem as well. And this might have been heard often, but then so we do this shared prosperity. So we develop together. Then also, let's say the minerals or the metals. I mean, if the prices jump, then it could be burdensome. So we would purchase them first and then lend them out to the suppliers later on. Then also we could provide them with funding to ease their liquidity issue. So we try to utilize a lot of options and modalities in order to make sure that the ecosystem will remain viable. And that is because now for a vehicle, now any of the parts or the components, so the 30,000 parts and components that go into a vehicle, each and every one of them have to fulfill its expected performance. Otherwise, it could risk the safety of the passengers and the driver. So we truly understand that this is a shared development that we have to undertake together. Then also what Professor Kwak has mentioned, so maybe it could have something like an iconic campaign. So that reminded me of this. So in our U.S. business, there's a Hopper Nielsen So this is the pediatric cancer patient charity, and so it has been done for over 10 years. And I understand that it has won a lot of resonance in the US, and it also has instilled a positive image on Hyundai Motor Group as well. But I do understand and also agree with Professor Kwak's comment, and not only about ESG, but of course the ESG is now, we already feel that ESG has really made its way into the heart of business management. So given this understanding, then we would also come up with more ideas that will be able to satisfy the shareholders, consumers, management, everyone involved. Thank you.
Next, we'd like to hear from Ms. O of Amore Pacific. Yes, thank you very much for the good questions. Beginning with Professor Shin's question about gender equality, are we going to continue focusing our CSR activities on women? Yes, this is a big dilemma for us as well. Over the past 20 years, we have been engaging in activities for women, but we are seeing a little bit of changes. So we're expanding to women and young, so women and youth and teenagers. But in trying to look at CSR activities, we try to separate that from our business economic activities, because with CSR, yes, we do feel that there is a gender imbalance. There is a wage gap, and in terms of income and educational opportunities, we do still believe that there is a gender imbalance, and that is why with our CSR activities, we still try to right the skew by focusing on women, but expanding that to youth and teenagers, because we also have to look at different activities where we can make the most impact in. However, when it comes to our business performance, we look at our customers. In the past, our customers were primarily female, but now we're seeing that we have to tailor our products and services to everyone, that everyone is entitled to beauty and health. And so we have this slightly different approach when it comes to our business activities and our CSR activities. And the other professor talked about our value chain and our supply chain. Going forward with ESG, I think that the value chain is going to be a very big issue, not just on stability, but also on due diligence, that EU is working on ways to do diligent activities of our value chain. So this means that big companies have a big imperative upon us, and we are trying to do this in 3 different ways. So first, when we bring in do onboarding of a new supplier, we do an audit of the supplier. We want to make sure that we are working with competent suppliers. And once we've onboarded a supplier, we create a mutual growth fund. Some suppliers need help with safety. Some suppliers need help with quality management. So we do audit and inspections to try to provide management resources to these suppliers to build up their capacity, so that together we can help them to make inroads overseas. And this is what we're doing to try to build up and support our supply chain. Lastly, on Professor Kwak's question, globally, we are already expanding to about 8 countries when it comes to Make Up Your Life program. Makeup is a key part of what we do at Amore Pacific, and this is something that we can do a good job in, that we can make an impact on. So we've started in Korea, but we've focused on China, Vietnam, different countries in ASEAN, so a total of 8 countries. The Make Up Your Life program's common direction is similar, but we have slight differences depending on the market that we're in. With the value chain and our employees and the sales professionals work together. And these partners are contributing to their local communities, and they feel proud of the fact that they are contributing to their communities. Once this goes beyond a certain percentage of the revenue, we have a benchmark target internally. We feel that that much has to be given back to the community. And this is something that we already have discussed in place with the local companies, the subsidiaries in other markets.
Thank you very much for that. So now, given the limited time, I would just like to compress all my questions into one. So then I would like to ask Professor Shin and Vice President Kim to respond to this question. Now, the GEF, one of the topic is to remember our common future. So I believe that it is also important to think about the kind of future that the ESG activities are going to create. So then my question is then the future firms, what is the role that they should play? In one sentence, please. Well, I would say that the ESG or the CSR or the CSV, so when I think about all these concepts, then in the end, so the relations between firms and society have to change. So for firms, they're no longer separate from the society engaged only in economic activities, but we see that the relations between the society and firms are now becoming more and more interactive. So the society is expecting more from firms in terms of the social activities too. So I would say that the relations between the society and the firms have to be different from what we know now. So it's not going to be separate from each other, but then the firms have to become closer part of the society.
Yes, next, Ms. Kim. That was a very difficult question, but if I were to try to respond to that, I don't think the right question is to ask how companies could be different and distinguished from a society, because when we talk about a sustainable future, it impacts all of us. So together we have to coexist and share and grow in the future, and I think that is the correct answer for all of us. Thank you very much. We talked about the role and impact of companies. I think that we would have benefited from more time. Thank you very much for the insightful discussions and presentations. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for this. And with that, we'd like to conclude the session on firms, society, and SDGs. Thank you very much.
And panelists for making time this evening. We also look forward to seeing more and more Korean firms pursuing transformative business strategies in both domestic and global markets to address unmet needs of the current and future generations. Thank you.